Whoa, look at that. We're live.
Oh boy,
Did you know that?
I do now.
Chris was betting if I'd show up on time. Well, guess what? You can't say that I didn't because I actually clicked the go live button 10 seconds early to time it like perfectly. So even with the stream
Whoa.
delay, I think you'll find that this was pretty much a superb job.
Good job.
Yeah,
Nicely
so this
done.
this was pretty nice. This was pretty nice. Now, I didn't finish my dinner. I was having some mac and cheese, but back in the early days of dark mode, we did uh several early before the stream actually starts finishing up our pizzas, and honestly, just having to watch myself eat made me question my purpose in life, so I'm not going to be doing that, but I am thirsty, so I might just
Well, doing this off camera. We don't want this on camera. Is that right?
Exactly. It's like a Kim Jong Un thing. They say that he doesn't have a butthole or that he doesn't eat or whatever. It's sort of like a deity thing. I feel like if people see us eat or drink, it sort of breaks the fourth wall.
I see. That
Mm.
that that makes a lot of. That's very reasonable. I understand.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Uh they say, come on, guys, it's normal. I don't know what you're talking about. Noah and I actually don't need sustenance. And as they are rightly pointing out, we don't actually have lower halves of our bodies.
That's true. You never see the full body on a podcast.
Could you imagine like a standing full body vertical podcast?
That would honestly be kind of funny.
Okay, picture this. TikTok, right? Vertical video. Split that screen in half,
Uh-huh.
the narrowest possible split screen, and then have a full body standing on either side.
That would be I don't know, because like I guess they kind of do that, like like on news shows when they go up to someone like on the board or whatever, and they're standing up, or the weather. Maybe you don't see the whole body, but I don't know. For an hour,
True.
just two people in different voids talking to each other for an hour, just
In a full
standing.
body,
Yeah,
very, very small split screen on vertical video. I think we got to make that.
I just want to see what it would look like. I feel like it would
It would be
look really
hilarious.
funny.
See,
Yeah.
look at this. This is an interesting comment actually, because I also have this decision. We are actually broadcasting at the same time as Euphoria. Um,
Mm.
I don't know that there's a ton of audience crossover. In all honesty, the past 4 weeks, I have not noticed a difference in viewership as a result of that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I do watch Euphoria. It's a bit it's a bit ridiculous. Noah, have you started it yet?
I still haven't. I will, but I haven't started it yet.
You gotta get on that because they release weekly. So I want you to get caught up so that I can live tweet, except in iMessage, I live text you
Yeah.
about the happenings in Euphoria. You have
All
some
right.
time. You have some
Okay.
time because I believe there's 10 episodes and this week is 4, or is it 5? I have no idea. But watch it. There's only 8 episodes in season 1, so it won't take you too
Mm.
long. You'll enjoy it. Does
I
anyone here watch Euphoria? And does anyone here what are people's thoughts? I don't know what the tech community's thoughts are on the show.
I've heard interesting things about it. That's all I know.
Yes. This is an interesting. This is an dude. Sometimes YouTube comments kill me. Wait, will you guys stream next week? because I won't watch next week. All right, guys. I'm sorry, but Bobby is not going to be able to make it, so we gotta cancel the show next week
Oh,
because
man.
Bobby he can't make it. So sorry.
We don't want anyone to miss out on this. Not that
Exactly.
it's like a podcast that you can look up on any podcast platform.
No, of course not. It's not like we're uploaded weekly on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcast thing, Amazon, Google Play, YouTube, or any other podcasting platform that you might be interested in. This is it. It's one and done.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure we actually do take attendance. So if you're not here, I don't know what to tell you. Your grade is going to suffer.
If you're not here, you will be marked absent, and if you get 3 absences, then that's a detention.
We don't make the rules.
Oh, that was so much worse than eating on camera. that
I didn't like that.
was
I'm
that's
having
exactly what you were trying to avoid.
I'm having Panera mac and cheese because I was working on a video project and I didn't have time. I was gonna go to Wawa. That's you could never go to Wawa, Mr. East Coast trader, West Coast boy.
That is true. No one knows what Wawa is around here.
Exactly. You know what it is, but you don't even have the luxury of partaking in it because you've given up on the correct ocean,
I'm
the Atlantic, of course.
I will the next time I'm back in on the East Coast, I will go to Wawa. I'm looking
Good.
forward to it.
That's necessary. Noah, I am actually sitting here looking off to my left, which is in your direction. So it looks like I'm looking at you. Hello. I've got the
Hello.
30-inch Apple Cinema display.
Oh yes, I did
beautiful.
see. I saw the setup picture that you posted on Twitter. It looked very nice.
Oh, it's an absolutely beautiful display. I love it. And I want a new Pro Display XDR. I want it. I want to buy it with my money.
You want you want Apple to release an update to the Pro Display XDR.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, anecdotally, I am actually trying to order a current one right now. However, shipping dates are slipping substantially, like 6 weeks, 10 weeks. So, I don't know. What if we get a new Pro Display XDR in like March?
I mean, there were those rumors, and we can talk about this during the podcast, but there were rumors about like a consumer level display, right? I don't know if we talked about them before.
I don't know if we have. I've talked about them in videos, but we should definitely talk about them. In fact, you know what? It's 8:58 here. Sorry, for you it's 5:58 because you're weird.
It's good.
So, well, I think we should just start out with some display discussions. Because I mean, my most recent video, but a mere 2 days ago, was on the Pro Display XDR from 18 years ago, and it's really quite interesting. So yeah, we could start with that.
We should definitely put this topic on display.
Oh. Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. That's very good.
Thank you.
In fact, you know what, Noah? This topic is too good. It's 8:59, 5:59, or some other time if you live somewhere else. Kind of a pointless. We pegged this to a time, but everyone's time is different. So that was kind of a bad call on my part. But anyway,
anyways.
Time is a construct, and I say we start now because we're already on the topic.
All right. I'm recording.
Welcome to Dark Mode, the podcast that brings you sage advice from 2 technology experts. And that's not just what we call ourselves, it's what our moms tell people when the display is Pro XDR. I'm your host, Luke Miani.
And I'm your host, Noah Rubin. On this show, we take questions from listeners, attempt to answer them to varying degrees of success, and maybe even have a laugh or two along the way.
And for our first topic on tonight's episode of The Inevitability of White Male Friendship, comma, a podcast, we are discussing Apple's displays. Now, as you guys may have seen on the channel, but a few days ago, I uploaded a video on the 30-inch Apple Cinema display from 2004. I've actually got it right next to me here. It is looking beautiful and fresh, even though you can't see it. And if you're listening to this, then you can't see anything because that's how audio works. But my goodness, no, I don't know if you've seen any of the details on this thing. Isn't it amazing?
I know that thing is we've talked about it a little bit. I know it's pretty old. It's what was it, like 18 years old, is that right?
Yep, 2004.
And that was 18 years ago.
Yeah, no, that alone is kind of freaky.
Weird. But yeah, that's yeah, and I know it looks cool. And was this the one that had that like special display port thing to have so much bandwidth at the time?
So it's not actually DisplayPort. This predates most digital video standards. It uses dual link DVI.
That's what I meant. But it's the thing where they had two of them. They had to invent that special technology, right?
I'm not actually sure if Apple invented dual link DVI, but they certainly pioneered it because it wasn't really a thing beforehand. Because a normal DVI signal can't push 2560 by 1600 resolution. It's actually the same resolution as an M1 MacBook Air or MacBook Pro. So it's one that Apple's familiar with, but obviously it's much larger. Pixel density, right? It's not Retina. You wouldn't exactly expect that for 2004. But given that it's 18 years old, 2560 by 1600, 100 ppi, the color accuracy is excellent. I mean, even the brightness and contrast levels are very good. The viewing angles are surprisingly good. Every display that I ever used from before 2010 had like 6 degrees of angle where everything looked okay. And then, you know how a lot of like those older PC laptops, even if you were looking on it completely straight on, the pixels and the color at the top of the bottom of the display were already starting to shift. Like the viewing angles were so bad that you couldn't even view the whole display because the angles were so narrow.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, you'd turn the computer just a little bit and the like pixel they would like invert or like shift or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this thing does not have that, which I guess is why it costs $5,000 in today's money. But it does come with the stand.
That's good.
So that's a nice touch.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's a gorgeous display. You can pick them up for $200, which is pretty crazy. The most difficult part is just adapting it to work with USB-C. But fortunately, there is an adapter. You just plug it on in and it works great. It looks amazing. It has capacitive brightness. That's the thing. Every like third-party monitor I've ever used has some weird little nubbin on the back and you have to go into some really ugly menu to adjust the brightness. This just has a little button on the side. Boop boop, easy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And in fact,
that's
even
nice.
on laptops, certain laptops, some of the things I plugged it into, the brightness button on the Mac adjusted the screen on devices 18 years apart.
That's because most monitors I feel like don't do that, right?
I think the ultrafine ones probably do, but
Those
that's because they're
do.
using Apple panels.
Those do, but I feel like most like general monitors you plug into, you can't do
Yeah.
that.
And in fact, while we're on the subject of Apple monitors, this at the moment, this 30-inch cinema display is kind of a stand-in for me because I really want a Pro Display XDR. Or specifically, I want a new one, but at this point, I'm kind of addicted to a big old screen.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's first of all, I think it's kind of interesting because when you said, that the cinema display was $5,000 in today's money,
Yeah.
that's, about where the Pro Display XDR is. Obviously, you have to buy the stand with that as well, but like I don't know, it's just kind of funny to like you basically can compare them at that point. You're looking at they're both
Mhm.
just like pro displays. They're both at the same price point. So it's kind of interesting to compare them and, see how far we've come, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about going from 2560 by 1600 up to 6K resolution, talking about local dimming zones, there's a lot of difference. But one thing that is a little weird to me is that the Pro Display XDR, unlike this 30-inch cinema display, is kind of alone. Like when this thing came out, it was the high end of Apple's monitor range, but they did also offer the same enclosure, the same basic feature set in 23 and 20-inch sizes. And it's kind of weird that Apple essentially exited the monitor business. Like even since this, like this was the peak, right? They had the 23, they had the 20, they had the 20 inch, which was 1680 by 1050. They had the 23 at 1080p, and then they had the 30 inch at 2560 by 1600. That was the peak. They never had a better lineup relative to the time than that, because after that they went to the Thunderbolt cinema display, and that was the same panel in an iMac, but just on its own. But they didn't have like different versions. They didn't update it. They didn't make a Retina version. Then they had the LG Ultrafine displays, which were kind of a cop out because it was the same panel that the iMacs used, but it wasn't Apple, and it didn't have like the aesthetic and the usability, the little features that you would want from an Apple display. I want that back.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense for Apple to go back into the display market because like I mean, first of all, they were there, and then you can look at like LG. Obviously, they partnered with them, but like they have the Pro Display XDR, and I feel like Apple they get all these panels. Like you look at the MacBook Pro panel. Obviously, it's small, but like they put a lot of like new features in that. The Pro Motion,
Mhm.
the mini LED, like all that stuff. Like that, there's some really compelling tech in there, and I feel like if they could just get a bigger version of that, slap it in a box, like it makes a
Right?
lot of sense.
And I mean, it's the thing is they don't even have to be that like creative. All they have to do is take the panels that they're already using in other in iMacs and put them in a new housing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's for the longest time the cinema displays shared panels with iMacs. The Thunderbolt one, same thing. The Ultrafine, all of those things are iMac displays. And I think I actually had a poll about this, or I talked about this in a video. Like, if Apple were to do this again, I think you'd get a really interesting choice because you could essentially say, okay, I'm going to get my M1 Max in an iMac form factor, 27-inch, ProMotion, 5K, all that jazz, right? And you could get your M1 Max that way. Or you could buy the display, the same panel, and hook it up to an M1 Max Mac Mini, which would
Hmm.
allow you to upgrade those components independently. And I think that would be a really compelling option to have. I don't know, maybe one would be a little bit more expensive than the other. Maybe like a Mac Mini rig would be like 100, 200, $200 more. Maybe. But just the fact that you could have that perfectly good display panel and replace the much less expensive Mac Mini that's connected to it instead of the whole thing, I think would be I would probably do that, to be honest.
Yeah, and I feel like Because Apple obviously, they updated the Mac Mini with the M1, and now the rumors are saying that it's going to get the M1 Pro and M1 Max, which obviously makes sense. But I think the rumors, some people are thinking that that might even happen in the March event, which we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
But regardless, I feel like if Apple's selling the Mac Mini and they're not selling the display, because obviously most people who go for the Mac Mini are not going to go for the Pro Display XDR. They're losing out on display sales, basically. So like
Yeah.
if they capture that market too, that they've already got the Mac Mini, sell a consumer grade display, and you can capture even more of the market otherwise.
Exactly. I think that's probably the most compelling argument towards thinking, hey, there might be a display at this event. And
Hmm.
I might also add, if there is a display that goes with this new Mac Mini, I think it would be not a replacement for the Pro Display XDR, potentially. Because I don't know. It I feel like it would be really interesting if Apple could have 3 displays. And rumors, leaks have supported that possibility. Essentially, that they would take the panel out of the 24-inch M1 iMac and then take whatever panel we get in this year's larger Apple Silicon iMac and then a Pro Display XDR replacement, right? So you could have like $1,000 monitor, a $2,000 monitor, and a $3,000 monitor, whatever pricing structure they come up with. And then that would be perfect for pairing with an M1 Mac Mini or an M1 Pro Mac Mini or a Mac Pro. And I
Yeah.
think just having those options out there, you'd want to do that. Like if you're like you said, if you're launching the Mac Mini and you're not launching that monitor alongside it, then all of those launch day sales where someone would add the monitor as well, you're missing out.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you could make the argument like, oh, Apple's going to cut into the iMac sales if they do this, and Apple doesn't like to cut into
True.
their own sales, but they already have the Mac Mini and they've had it for a long time and they're still upgrading it. So you could argue that that kind of cuts into it. I guess maybe they figure if you already have your own display, just buy the Mac Mini and go with it. But like I don't see why they wouldn't just because they've had displays in the past and or they've worked with other companies like LG in the past. They sell displays, like Apple sells displays, whether they made it or not, they do sell
Mhm.
displays, and it makes sense to go with the Mac Mini. And I definitely agree with you. Whatever, if we do see a display, it probably won't be a new Pro Display XDR, because exactly like you said, Pro Display XDR or whatever the replacement would be would pair nicely with a Mac Pro, but obviously a
Mhm.
lot more expensive than what most people would want to pair with a Mac Mini. So that's where a consumer grade one would come in. So I think it makes sense.
I'm also wondering, like, theoretically, we're talking about people who would buy a Mac Mini and then, if the option was available, would buy a monitor to go with it. I also wonder how many people wouldn't buy a Mac Mini because there's no monitor to go with it. Because I think Apple's displays are somewhat unique. I mean, I'm sitting here in front of my iMac Pro, which is a 5K iMac essentially with fancier guts. But the 5K iMac is a pretty unique style of device. It's not something that you can recreate that easily, purely because I am not aware of displays that are 5K resolution 27-inch size. It's not common, but it's a really, really nice. I love the fact that I can be sitting in Final Cut Pro and have a viewer window that's high enough resolution to really get a feel for what my footage looks like. I love the fact that I can view 4K with room around it, or editing in Photoshop. Like having this number of this pixel density, this resolution, it just makes a lot of sense. And there's not a ton of other. There's nothing out there that does that. I'm not even aware of a Pro Display XDR competitor, quote unquote, that has a 32-inch size, 6K resolution, that kind of pixel density. I just don't think those really exist.
That's true. And I wanted to let you respond because I know you have a good response. There were some comments saying like, "Oh, why not just buy some like cheaper and larger monitor? Like, why buy the Pro Display XDR at all?" And I know you have a good response for that.
Oh, I don't remember what my good response is.
I mean, I know you said, as far as like color coverage and like doing pro level work, you might need like a really pro monitor for that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I think the big thing for me is I've been on 27-inch iMacs for like 4 years now, and I know many people have been using 27-inch iMacs for a decade, even before they were Retina. But I want something a little bigger. And that's the problem with an iMac is you're kind of tethered to the screen that's a physical part of it. Um, so I've been toying with getting a Pro Display XDR, and I have actually ordered one, kind of. And I know, yeah. So it's a little weird, the situation, because I didn't want to pay. I'm not going to buy a new one at retail price. I'm not an idiot. It's been out for more than 2 years. It's 5 grand. I'm not going to pay retail for that. But weirdly enough, used Pro Display XDRs aren't really a whole lot cheaper. So I've actually found a way to get a new one for less than a used one, which I can't really go into too much detail on. But um, essentially, the issue was that I started trying to like get this thing in like November, and there's been delays trying to figure stuff out, logistics and whatnot, and essentially the shipping dates are slipping big time. In fact, I kind of want to see. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and I want to see what um, Apple has the Pro Display shipping in. I think it's under Mac. Yes, here we go. So if we go to buy one of these things, standard glass, I'll take the Pro stand. Oh, that's right. Yeah, so it doesn't even show the delivery details until you like go to check out, which is weird. I don't know if it's always done that,
Hmm.
but now at least it is saying that the Pro Display, the stand will get here in 6 to 8 days, but the display a month, March
Hmm.
3 to March 10th. And I don't know, Noah, if you've been up to date, but does that date range sound familiar to you?
Yeah, I think what was it, March 8th, right? Is the rumored date for the Apple event.
It sure is. It sure is. And that's really weird, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a supply chain issue and a coincidence, but it is kind of funny that that falls like right in that range that they gave there. So I don't know.
And I don't know. I get that, anything could be supply chain now. Um, I'm pretty sure MacBooks are delayed as well. I think if you try to buy the 14-inch MacBook Pro, those are shipping. Uh, the base model 14-inch is saying February 22nd to March 1st. The other 14 is saying February 15th. The 16s are, wow. Oh my gosh, if you try to get the fully decked out 16-inch, the pre-config one with the M1 Max, that's saying April.
Oh wow.
Wow. But yeah, so there are delays, absolutely. Very weird delays because that one's in April, but the entry level 16-inch delivers tomorrow.
You should order it.
So yeah, that to me screams supply chain. The fact that you can get a base model now, they're in stock right now, and the higher spec one is shipping in April. That's supply chain, 100%. But that Pro Display XDR is a little bit interesting because it's been out for over 2 years and they've never had, it's not a high volume thing. I don't know that that enough people are buying Pro Display XDRs right now in 2022 to like push their deliveries that far back. I think it's legitimately possible that some display would come with the Mac Mini, which we've heard rumored for a March 8th event.
Yeah, that's a good point because the product has been out for a while, and like you said, it's not a high volume product, so they probably have a pretty good idea of what the sales are going to be. I don't see any reason why they would be abnormal around now. So it's a good point. I could
It's
see it.
interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've got one theoretically on order. Hopefully, I don't know. If it does get, I mean, the thing is, if it ships in March and it gets here like when that event happens, I'll just return it. It's not a big deal. And
Mhm.
even if it, it's a type of thing where I get it in March and it gets replaced in November or December, then, well, I still have some content that I can make for it, and that'll probably make up for the difference, the hit that I would take in depreciation. Not to mention that if I get the Pro stand, which I have done, regrettably, I would imagine that that will still work. So I'll just not have to buy that later this year. So I
That's why
really
the
don't think
stand
it's
is
going to be
still
that
in
big a deal.
stock.
Whoa. Ricky, can you send me an email instantaneously? Instantaneously, Ricky, email me, elmiani98@gmail.com. That's publicly available information, by the way. I feel like now I'm going to get a bunch of fake Rickies in my emails, and I'm not going to be able to
Yeah.
figure out how to do this. But if Ricky is in fact telling the truth here, I'll do it. I'll buy it right now on the spot. So we'll
Wow.
see what happens. We'll see what
Okay.
happens.
Okay.
I wanted to talk. Let's go on to our next topic, shall we? I think we'll come back to March 8th a little bit
Okay.
later,
Okay.
but it's been on my mind. It's my flood situation, Noah.
Mhm.
So I've had an unfortunate situation that has developed in my building, which was that someone was using the apartment gym, had their ablutions, and clogged the toilet rather significantly and failed to address that problem in any way, which caused an enormous leak in the pipe. I think they somehow broke a pipe. Like, I want to meet this person. I kind of want to know like how, like what kind of a person is able to destroy the plumbing system of an entire building after going using the restroom.
True.
Um so that's interesting enough, right? But the unfortunate side effect of that broken pipe is that it leaked directly onto a PC that I had in my storage unit and soaked it thoroughly. Mm.
Yeah. It looked
You
it
saw the
looked pretty
picture?
bad. I did.
Yeah, so it was sitting in a puddle. The drip was landing sort of right behind the power supply and splashing
Mm. Oh,
into
good.
the exhaust, onto
Good.
the motherboard, inside of the power supply. Ah, wonderful. Isn't that great?
That is. Yeah, I was honestly wondering. I didn't realize that the PC was in your storage unit. I thought it was like in your apartment, and I was like, wow, that must have been really bad for the leak or whatever to get all the way up into your apartment. It makes a lot more sense being in the storage unit. That I will say. But that's pretty
Yeah,
rough.
yeah. So I mean, I guess the fortunate thing is this wasn't a PC that I'm using all the time. This is my old gaming PC. that rather than upgrade, I ended up building a new one because it was ITX and I wanted it just was more practical to build an ATX, right? So I built a new PC like 2 years ago, and this was the old one. Still good though. It's got a Ryzen 5 3600X. I think it's got 32 gigs of RAM. Well, I should really be using past tense because I'm not optimistic about its fortune after this
Yeah.
recent event. Um, yeah, there was a lot of. If you go on my Twitter at Luke Miani, you can look at the picture. It's pretty horrific. Fortunately, there's a lot of very interesting, um, interesting takes on what this represents here in the comment section. We've got the poo PC. That's a good one. Uh, Someone suggested a video title: "How to Clean Poopy PC." Nice, nice. Someone said that at their school they destroyed a bathroom by flushing a block of clay down the toilet. That sounds about right. Someone said that they ate too much Taco Bell. All of these are believable. Fortunately, whatever pipe broke, I think, was the refill the toilet pipe, not the drain the toilet pipe, which is of course clogged. So it's not. I mean, I can't say for sure that it isn't effluent, but it doesn't reek. So I'm hopeful that it's not that bad.
That's good. That person who said the comment about the clay reminded me. I don't know if you remember in middle school. Remember when they called all like the middle school boys and they like yelled at us because someone like did something in the bathroom, and I think they had to like remove the urinals or something because people were doing bad things in the bathroom. Do you remember that at all?
I thought somebody absolutely shattered one of the urinals or a sink or something.
Something I don't remember, but they like removed. I feel like they removed the urinals, or at the very least they like had an assembly and they yelled at all of us.
I do remember the yelling assembly. Yeah, they had
Yeah.
they were like, "All boys, come here right now," and they were like, "You
Yeah.
guys suck," and we were kind of like, "Well, yeah, you're not wrong."
Yeah. Oh man.
13-year-old boys or something else.
Yeah.
Someone stole an entire stall door for a TikTok trend. See, honestly, right, like we're talking about all of these things that happened to us in our middle school years, 2010 to 2013. Honestly, I feel like it's not even that bad compared to what the TikTok generation has probably inflicted upon schools and their employees.
That is true. Or at the very least, it's now more public. Not that we didn't have social media and
True.
whatever back then. Like I'm not trying to
It,
sound like some old man, but it not in this
yeah,
same way.
it was definitely different. I mean,
Yeah.
what were the viral things when we were in middle school? Trollolol guy,
Yeah.
Nyan Cat,
Angry
Gangnam
Birds.
Style,
Gangnam
Angry
Style, that was
Birds.
a good one.
Yes, that's a good one. No, Flappy Bird was later.
That was high
It was
school.
like
We were
high
in high
school.
school. Yeah.
Um, do you remember the interior crocodile alligator? I drive a Chevrolet movie theater. That made the
Yes.
rounds for like a good couple weeks.
Yes, I do remember that.
Of course, Jake and Amir.
That was that was underrated, but that was a good
Totally
one.
underrated.
Yeah.
That was more of like niche internet humor
Yeah,
that still holds up.
definitely.
Yeah. How did we start on that? How did we Oh yeah, we talked about my flood.
Yes, the
That's how we
flood.
got started on this, right? So, yeah, I've got the computer. I use some I use the cool air setting on my blow dryer to try to dry it, and then I'm going to just kind of leave it sitting for like 3 days or something. Mm,
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all you can do. But
yeah.
I'm assuming you have renter's insurance, right?
I do have renter's insurance.
You think they
I
might maybe they
wonder.
would cover it? I would look into that at least.
You know, I was gonna say like, oh, I don't know. I was gonna be like, maybe I'll just let it go. But I guess why do I care? It's an insurance company. I don't care about them.
Yeah, honestly.
Even if it's a PC I wasn't using all that much, I pay for that stupid coverage, and they're like, this guy's a sucker. We're never gonna have to pay anything because it's an apartment and nothing ever happens to those. Well, guess what? Flood, baby.
Yep.
Pay up.
Something happened.
Give me that cash. Who knows? Maybe I'll rebuild it. I'll make like an insurance PC.
Honestly, I think it's worth it. Especially, no, you know what you do is you quote them the prices that there's like today's prices that are like super
So
high.
here's
Not that they
my
would do
moral
that,
conundrum.
obviously.
Here's my moral conundrum, though. I think you'd have to probably do fair market value, but it's a custom PC, so that gives me some leeway. I
Yeah.
think I could probably say $1,400, which is a slight exaggeration, and that's believable. Chip
Yeah.
shortage, that's fine. The thing is, I had already sold the graphics card from it, and that would have been the big cash money.
Yeah.
So the question is, all law enforcement has to look away right now. And you're not allowed to tell anyone I said this, but like, what if there was a graphics card in it? You know what I mean? Like, what would happen?
There was a graphics card, but the force of the water like
Ejected it.
it ejected it, and then it like flew down. It went downstream, and now
Dissolved.
it's
It
gone. Oh,
dissolved.
that works too.
Insurance adjusters are not tech savvy people.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. For those,
Yes.
for those, tell them there was an RTX 3090. I do have an RTX 3090, so that wouldn't be a complete lie. Okay, I'm just kidding. I'm not actually gonna do that. Like that's fraud.
Yeah.
But I might honestly try to get insurance to pay for it because I mean I pay them $10 a month for perpetuity. They might as well do something when somebody takes a giant dump in our toilet and floods poopy water on my PC.
You should definitely try and get your money for it. That's what insurance is for.
Exactly. Just put a piece of crap graphics card in it for photos, says Cole. By the way, longtime sugar daddy of the podcast, Cole Weathers here. I think that's an accurate statement at this point.
Yeah.
I honestly would, but there is no such thing as a POS graphics card anymore. Even like an RX 570 is like a $400 card. It's ridiculous at this point. Tell them it was a 2019 Mac Pro. Interesting. I actually do have a Mac Pro in there. It was just behind other things, so I don't know. Like the way that I had situated my this locker was actually kind of fortunate. I didn't intentionally arrange it in this way, but it ended up being quite helpful when there's sitting water in the unit. And that was I basically put the empty iMac boxes on the ground and then put tech stuff on top of that. So fortunately, all the other stuff that was in that is fine. It's just this PC. But then I think there was also a Mac Pro at the back that I didn't look at, but might be fine. But it's like a 2009 like $100 Mac Pro. Most of the components are taken out of it anyway, so I didn't even bother checking because I didn't really care to be honest.
Fair enough.
So I forgot what we talked about earlier, the topic that you wanted to get into.
Oh, I think that was more like the March 8th event rumor and maybe the
Yes.
kind of stuff that we would see there.
Yes. Would you like to fill us all in on what that rumor entails?
Sure, yeah, I've looked into it a little bit. So it's seeming like the rumor is that the first Apple event of the year will be on March 8th. And I feel like that's fairly in line. There's usually an Apple March event. I feel like it's usually later in the month, but maybe I'm wrong. I know you have a better memory for that stuff than I do.
Yeah, I think March 8th was. I think that's a pretty believable date.
Yeah.
But and honestly, that's pretty soon, which I'm also quite happy about.
Yeah, there hasn't been much going on for a while, so that will be nice
Yeah.
to have.
And last year was admittedly a little bit light. It was a little bit light on the updates. I mean, I think it wasn't any worse than usual, and we certainly got some exciting stuff. But mostly, if we're honest, it was the end of the year, right? We had, I mean, up until September, there was not, there was slim pickings, admittedly. We had the we had the iPad Pro, which was not anybody's favorite update. I covered it a little bit, and I can tell you, nobody cared about those iPads. Like
Yeah.
I've made videos on iPads that have been viewed many times. Nobody cared about the M1 iPad. It's just not that interesting because it was like, okay, so it's a faster thing and a thing that didn't need to be faster. Cool.
Mhm.
And then we had the M1 iMac, which I think had good. People were interested in the iMac, but the fact that it was M1, which we already saw, meant that it didn't have a ton of new substance to dive into. It was interesting to look at because when I did the initial round of M1 reviews in November 2020, those videos got eyeballs because everyone wanted to know how they were stacking up. iMac, what you were watching it to find out about the package. You weren't trying to find out about the performance. I mean, we talked
True.
about it a little bit, but just to see like, oh, the one fan version, the 7-core GPU, and like it was like these very minor differences that we were talking about. So the real heavy hitter was when the MacBook Pros came out. But even that, I have to say, I talked to a couple of other YouTubers and we all kind of noticed this. When the event happened, interest was sky high. I made several videos before the MacBooks actually shipped that pulled better views than my videos that I made with the MacBooks themselves because the hype was off the charts. The initial round of reviews, the first week, those videos did really well, but then after a week, the MacBook Pro content was gone. It was so saturated with so many people talking about it that I would upload a video, and if I even breathed a touch of MacBook Pro on it, the views just tanked.
Hmm.
So that was pretty interesting, anecdotally. But now we're talking about, I think, another situation with the M1 iMac, right? If we do get new Macs in March, I think it's safe to say that they're not going to be new processors.
Right. I think the main rumors are, I think, like a new iPhone SE, a new
Hmm.
iPad Air, and I think maybe Mac Mini. And obviously, those would get M1 Max and M1 Pro. So I think those were the main rumors.
Yes, and I think honestly, I think that iPad Air refresh. I buy most Apple products. I think I'd probably skip that one because I mean, realistically, they're probably going to put like an A15 in it instead of an A14, and then add Center Stage, which has made it around all the other iPads. And I'm not sure that there's any other rumors that we've heard for that one. Am I wrong?
I think they're just bringing it in line with the other iPad updates. So
Yeah, so
yeah,
that's
like you
pretty
said.
light. And then iPhone SE, that I think is going to be interesting. I don't know if you've been too plugged into these rumors, but well, it's 5G. That's
Hmm.
a pretty nice upgrade. Almost certainly will be an A15 chip, which, at sub $500 price tag, regardless of anything else, you're already at a good place. Sub 500 for an A15 and 5G, that's a great deal, regardless of what it looks like.
Yeah.
The question is, what will it look like? Are they going to finally ditch the iPhone 8 body from 2017, which was in itself an updated version of the iPhone 6 body from 2014? Are we going to finally leave this 8-year-old design? I don't know.
Yeah, the last rumor that I saw, which was maybe a little while ago, was that they were sticking with it this year, and then next year they were going to go to like the iPhone 10 style, like notch style body. So that was the last thing I saw, but that was a little while ago.
I Dude, I mean, I loved the iPhone SE that we got in 2020. It was fantastic. But yeah, I mean, Mac rumors I've just pulled up here. They're not expecting any design changes for the next version. So the big issue for me is, I mean, there's the cosmetic things of like, wow, that's a really old design. It's a single camera. Um, the home button, the bezels, the lack of Face ID. That's that's getting very long in the tooth at this point.
Yeah.
As I
Yeah.
said, 8-year-old design. That's like a bit much. But the biggest thing, the single biggest thing is the battery. It's just not good enough. It just is not, like, if you look at any other iPhone, they've been getting thicker, they've been getting chunkier batteries, and and Apple has, in my opinion, correctly chosen to prioritize getting good battery life out of a phone versus trying to make it thinner, right? Battery life meaningful. Thinness not really that meaningful. But the iPhone SE, because it's an 8-year-old design, was when Apple was still trying to say like, "Oh, it's 17% thinner than the previous generation," when nobody actually cared. So you're going to
Yeah.
be losing out on battery life significantly.
That's true because like that design, the iPhone 6, that was like right when they were like at the peak of their thinness over everything
Mhm.
else kind of thing. And
And
it's
the 8,
also
anyone?
interesting. Well, yeah, that definitely. And also, the 5G will have a non-negligible impact on the battery as well.
That's a very good point, because the battery, I mean, that's the craziest thing. The battery itself is identical to what shipped 5 years ago on the iPhone 8 with an A11 chip, without 5G. So, yeah, the A15 is maybe more efficient than the A13, so maybe that would counteract the battery life hit from 5G, but with the same exact battery, there is a 0% chance that they will improve battery life. In fact, I think it would be worse. And even if they did improve it a little bit, it has a long way to go. I have an iPhone SE. I daily drove it for a little while. The battery life is its biggest flaw. It is on the very, very, very close edge of unusable, in my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess like the SE was good for Apple because they've had the design for so long. So like all of the, manufacturing and supply chain, like all of that stuff had been set up and they could just keep it going, change out the internals a little bit, but as far as the case and everything, just keep it going. But I guess now we're at the point where the SE is the only phone in that style that they've had for like a while, which I
Mhm.
guess, it's been a couple of years, so I guess you could have said the same thing, when they released the SE2. I don't know. But now it's kind of getting to the point where like that's it's I don't know how economical it still is if all of the other phones have, the notch and the
Mm-hmm.
flat sides at this point, and this is like the one phone that's sort of left in the dust. And then so I don't know. Maybe Apple will keep the design for one more year, but it's definitely definitely getting old.
I would really like to see them move over to the iPhone 10R or the iPhone 11 design. I think that would be really, really compelling. And I think honestly, the only risk with that would be eating into sales of the other previous gen iPhones. Um, I think if they were to go to essentially the iPhone 11 body with an A15 and um, I guess it would probably have 5G as well, which the iPhone 11 doesn't. That would make it a little bit more expensive. Right now, they're still selling the iPhone 11 for $499 with 64 gigabytes. So I feel like it would definitely be a tall order to essentially say, "Hey, I want the A15 and also 5G and also take $100 off that price." But at the same time, like, I don't know, 450 or honestly even 499 for an iPhone 11 body with A15 and 5G, that seems like a pretty darn good deal, and I think people would definitely buy that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting too because the SE kept the old design, because Apple had that design and they had the manufacturing and the supply chains and all that. And so, like you said, if you look now, the iPhone 11 is still being sold in the
Mhm.
fall when the iPhone 14 comes out. Theoretically, let's say the iPhone 11 disappears and then when the next iPhone SE comes,
Mm.
theoretically, let's say that they moved it over to that supply chain, and maybe that's why they're expecting next year, not this year. I don't know.
That's an interesting thought because the 2020 iPhone SE also linked up with discontinuing the iPhone 8, which they had been selling at that point.
Mm.
But I will say, if we're going to look at, historical precedent, right? In 2016, the iPhone SE came out using the iPhone 5S body,
Mhm.
3 years old. In 2020, the iPhone SE came out using the iPhone 8 body, 3 years old. In
Mm.
2022, the iPhone 11 body is 3 years old, 2019. So the precedent is there to say, hey, maybe they will continue to use this 3-year old, and maybe they would just stop selling the iPhone 11 in March.
Right. Yeah, I could see if they switch over to iPhone 11 style body, I would definitely see them, stop selling the iPhone 11. But that would be an interesting. That would be one way they could do it. They could wait another year for the design, or they could jump on it this year. That's interesting.
I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Also, on the subject of the iPad, Cole pointed out here, I think it's weird nothing else ever got the touch sensor like the iPad Air. Perhaps he's proposing an iPhone 11 without Face ID with like a touch ID in the side button. But also, there was another implementation of the touch sensor, and that was the iPad mini.
Right.
I think a lot of people have honestly forgotten about the iPad mini, including myself. It's in a drawer turned off. I want to love it, but it's hard to.
Yeah, I don't blame people for forgetting about it, to be honest. That is an interesting idea about putting the Touch ID in the side, and I feel like Touch ID is one of the big differentiators between the SE and the regular or pro iPhones or whatever you want to call them, because they all have Face ID and they have for a while, and only the SE, as far as iPhones go, have Touch ID. So that's an important distinction. I
Exactly.
think it would be interesting if they use the iPhone 11 body without the Touch ID, without the Face ID sensor. What would the notch look like? I don't know if they would go out of their way to make a tiny notch and
Oh,
like
certainly
redesign
not.
that. So it
I
would
think they
just be
would
like a
leave the
mostly empty
notch and it would be
notch.
empty.
Yeah, that could be a little. I guess it wouldn't look any different really, but yeah, I do think that Touch ID is one of the big differentiators.
I do wonder if it has to be anymore. Just because, like, I don't know. I feel like Face ID has matured enough at this point that it's probably not a huge expense for Apple to manufacture. There's been modifications to it, like I think in the iPhone 12, they made it more compact. They've made it more compact this year. Like there have been improvements to it, but I think in certainly an iPhone 11 form, if they can sell that phone for $499, I think Face ID has matured to the point where they can probably start to decrease the price on that. Because as you might imagine with Apple, I personally think that we pay a price premium for new technology when it first comes out, but I think Apple ends up eating some of that cost early on because then they keep charging you for it once they've figured out how to make it cheaper. Like if you look at the new MacBook Pros, the fact that they like if you look at the 14-inch, right? At 1999, they upped the price for the base configuration from 1799 to 1999. But for that, you're getting this new display, which is undeniably dramatically more expensive to make. Un- Nobody is going to argue with that because it is not a display that you will find out there. Mini LED and high refresh rate, variable refresh rate with a notch, like that is a very expensive piece to make.
True.
And they didn't, at the end of the day, increase prices all that much. Yes, you could argue they're probably saving a lot of money by using their own silicon, even if it's more powerful. It's a lot less expensive to make. I think someone ballparked an iPhone chip like an A14 or an A15 as costing about $25 to manufacture. So, yeah, I'm sure they're saving plenty of money by not using Intel, but those are expensive displays. We're right now, they're probably eating the cost. 3 years from now, when we're still paying that price and they've gotten that manufacturing, that tooling worked out, at that point, you're probably giving them some pretty healthy margins.
That's definitely a good point. And I do agree that Touch ID, I'm sure it's a lot, or Face ID, I'm sure it's a lot cheaper now than it was in the iPhone 10. I guess the one thing that I'll say is, as far as, when I said that Touch ID was the differentiating factor between the SE, um, I didn't necessarily mean that it had to be, but more like Apple, purposely makes it
Wants
that
it to
way.
be. Mm,
Right, exactly. To push people, if you want the Face ID, you got to go to the bigger one. But you'll get something good you'll get something usable, something good on the base one, but that's one of the things that they want to be a difference.
that's a good point. Because if you notice the way that Apple rolls out their products, it's very uncommon, especially with the iPhone, for you to get new stuff on the cheaper one. Like the iPhone rolls out in a tiered way where things start on the most expensive one and then they trickle down.
Mhm.
Like Face ID started on the iPhone 10 and then it trickled down to the 10R and the 11 and then the 12 and then the 11 keeps going and they get cheaper. Everything trickles down, but you never see Apple come out with a new cheap phone that does something better than their expensive phone, at least at that time. They're very careful about that with the iMac, with the iPhone. Not as much with the Mac because Apple Silicon they started on the low end, but that kind of made sense because they have to build the chips up, and that's the way that you do it.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah, I mean, there've been people that are like, oh, the iPhone SE is going to use Touch ID, and so they're going to get rid of the notch. Nope. I Without even looking at who leaked it or any details, I can tell you right away, if there's a new design to be had, it is not on the iPhone SE. iPhone SE is a parts bin special. It is recycling the tooling and the exact same parts that you already have, updating them just enough to make it, you know, a good value and putting that on sale.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. I think you can see something similar in the iPad. You look at the 2018 iPad Pro refresh, and then eventually, that new design and some of the new features made their way to the iPad Air, and I guess you could say the iPad, and especially the iPad Mini as well. But again, the iPad Pro got it first, and it still has the most features out of all of the iPads, and the iPhones are the same way. And I definitely agree. Like there's even if they don't need the notch, there's no way that they're going to sell their cheapest phone with no notch all screen. And then their more
Yeah.
expensive phones are going to have some sort of a notch or even a hole puncher, like whatever it's going to be. There's no
Yeah.
way that the cheapest phone is starting this. That's not how this phone works, like you said.
Yeah, Apple they will sell that thing with an empty notch. Like they will
Yeah.
sell that thing with a little piece of bezel there that has nothing behind it but empty space. If it means putting it in the SE, like yeah, there's no way that I think there was actually a rumor. Let me look at this iPhone SE hole punch. I swear I saw a rumor of an iPhone SE with a hole punch camera. Analyst. iPhone SE adding 5G in 2022, hole punch design coming in 2023. Wait, this is from Ross Young? He's very accurate.
Okay, but here's the thing. 5G coming this year. Okay, we've had it in the iPhones for, what, two iPhones, two generations so far. The hole punch next year would be soon, but if the Pro models get a hole punch later this year, they would still beat the SE to the punch.
Oh. Whoa. Yeah, I mean that's a very true point. That would my next comment on that would be if Ross Young is saying he said hearing about a 6.1-inch version in 2023 with hole punch rather than a notch. If Ross Young is saying that that's a thing, that's very credible. But I would definitely add caveats to that, like, maybe the timeline. Maybe that's more of a 2024 thing. Uh, the other thing would be that if a hole punch design is coming on an iPhone in 2023 on an SE, then it's coming on other more expensive, better things sooner than that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
they would not start with the SE to debut hole punch. That's just it does not make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
I should also
definitely.
point out that this is that's a year old article, April 1st, 2021, and the nature of leaks can be fluid. It's possible to leak stuff with very, very credible information that is legitimate that ends up being wrong, not because the leak was wrong, but because Apple changed their minds. You may
Mm-hmm.
recall last year I had a leak saying that the new MacBook Pro would not have 64 gigabyte of RAM option. I had it saying that it would have a UHS-2 SD card, and I had it saying a backlit Touch ID sensor. Well, the UHS-2 was correct. The no 64 gigabyte option was like a partial thing because the information didn't we didn't know that there was a distinction between M1 Pro and M1 Max.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like in retrospect, that was an M1 Pro leak, not knowing about the M1 Max as a separate thing. So that's like a half and half. But the backlit Touch ID sensor, that was wrong. But I stand by the information that I talked about because it was unbelievably airtight. So that was a case of just like Apple changed their mind. That was months in advance, and they just decided not to do that. So it's always possible when you see leaks and you think, oh, these people are wrong, they're dumb. No, not necessarily. I mean, there are fake leakers, no doubt, but there are also real leakers who leak stuff that ends up being not accurate, like the Apple Watch Series 7 redesign that never ended up happening because Apple runs into stuff and they have to change their mind really quickly. And I mean, that whole situation was its own can of worms where the consensus is essentially, I don't know if you saw this, Noah, that the Apple Watch Series 7 was going to get redesigned. They had manufacturing trouble and they basically ditched it like last minute.
I did hear something about that, but hopefully we'll get that this year.
Dude, I'm hoping. I've still got my Series 5. I know you do too. I I mean, I'm not the biggest Apple Watch user, but if we do get that redesign, I'll probably upgrade.
Yeah, I definitely would if we get that redesign.
Especially if the battery life is better. Have you noticed your battery life starting to slip a little bit?
I don't know. I mean I wear mine 24/7, let's say, because
Oh wow.
yeah, well I wear it to bed and whatever. I obviously charge it
Hmm.
in the morning, charge it at night, but it's usually fine, but there are some times where I'll if it doesn't get as much time to charge in the morning, then it'll kind of die by the night. So,
Mm.
extra battery would always be nice to have.
Yeah, I mean, I've generally been more of like I charge it at night, so I wake up and it's full. I do my thing, and then I've started to notice lately that by the end of the day, it's getting lower and lower. I haven't had it like not make it through a day, but it has. I've noticed a difference. Um, you know what else I've noticed, Noah?
What else have you noticed?
I've noticed that our podcast is starting to wrap up a little bit, wouldn't you say?
I think so. I think this is good time, as good a time as any.
So I think I've got one thing to send us off for this episode, and that is from Sugar Daddy Cole Weathers in the comments, who said Luke's gym is a pretty successful leaker, and I think that's undeniable.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, and so on that note, oh man, I'm gonna go file an insurance claim, I guess.
Yeah, get that money.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have been your host, Luke Miani.
And I've been your host, Noah Rubin. We will see you next week and have a great night.